want to welcome everybody at the warehouse. Good morning. Great to be worshiping with you. Everybody at the fire hall, our friends up in Churchill, everybody joining us online live right now, and everybody here in our service here at the factory. Welcome to week 2 of Understanding Addiction. You know, I know as lead pastor that this is a touchy topic. Most churches don't actually go into talking about addiction for a number of reasons. One is many of us pastors don't have the expertise or the understanding or the experience to be able to talk about it in a knowledgeable way. Secondly, a lot of people just don't want to talk about it because it's one of those things we like to keep hidden. And we like to keep, kind of under the facade of our happy Sunday sort of face. And we've decided that we don't want to be that kind of church. We want to be able to call out what's really going on and examine it and do it in a life-giving way with lots of hope. And so we're really thrilled that Tim is doing some teaching with us on this. Before we get into the theory, though, I think it's so important for us to bring this down to real life. And I would love to invite you into Juan's story.
Hi, my name is Juan. I've been a part of Finding Freedom for about 3 months now. From the beginning, I was born in Santiago, Chile. My dad was involved in a political war. We had to move to another country, Argentina. And then from there, we moved to Romania and ended up coming to Canada. I don't remember much of my childhood. I guess life got tough. Not realizing what was going on, I started drinking at a very young age, at the age of 12. I started hanging around with the wrong crowd, but they did make me feel important. And again, I always felt alone. I don't know what was going on, but something was missing. I didn't have a purpose. I try to fill those things with other things like work, money. Addiction, it affected my life. Well, first I was a weekend binger, and I always treated it as, you worked hard this week one, you did great. It was like a reward system for me, but it just got progressively worse. And then it got to a point where the using started getting really bad, where I started getting into psychosis, starting believing things that weren't real, and it started driving me to insanity. Everything I tried, at first I thought that, it was starting to work. I'd get a month or two clean and then go back at it. And that question was, why am I going back to it? Why isn't these things working? I'm working the program and it's just not fulfilling what I need. And that's where it drove me to trying to end my life. It was like, if the programs out there weren't working for me, there was something else wrong. I've been clean now for, I've lost count. I don't even count, but it has to be 14, 15 weeks, longest ever. Don't even think of using anymore. It's realizing the addiction is not, that it's just a coping tool. Is huge. Before I thought the addiction was a problem. That was the main problem. It's not. And that's what makes the whole thing incredible. It's I really see myself getting to places that I never could before. Having a clear mind now, and it really, it just projects a much brighter future for myself without any restrictions. This program really works if you work it. We've heard that before. And I finally have my answer, and the question was always, why? I have my why, and now I can live my life.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you about addiction. And if you were comprehending what Juan was saying, it's the addiction was the symptom of deeper problems. The addiction was once seen as a solution to all of his problems. And the question I want to look at this morning with you is, what are those deeper problems? What is it that the addiction was trying to solve? If you were to talk to an addict who is getting real and into recovery, most of them would at some point in time say they always felt like there was a hole in their heart. There was this emptiness that they were trying to fill with drugs and alcohol, and it wasn't working, but they kept trying because it seemed to give a little bit of relief. So the question I want to talk about this morning and help unpack is, what causes that emptiness, that hole in the heart? Because if I can get some insight into that, then I can begin to understand the underlying thing that the addiction was trying to solve. And so 15 years ago, I was reading a book, and it got an idea in my mind. And the idea got me thinking, how are we wired? What causes us to be the way we are? What characterizes us? What are our needs? So I decided to read the book of Genesis, and as I went through the first 5 books of Genesis, I wrote down everything that I saw that was built into us as a need or a drive. And I ended up with a list of 12, and that's what I want to just look at for a minute with you to help you kind of see how God designed us. So the first one is that we are wired to want pleasure. And I think that comes out of God. Paul says to Timothy that our God is the eternally blessed or the eternally happy God. He is marked by joy. And so if you look at your own life, there's something in us that always is seeking pleasure, happiness, joy. When you go home today and have lunch, you don't go down home and say, make me the stuff I hate. You say, make me the stuff that'll give me pleasure. When you think about what you're going to do this off, you don't say, let's do something I hate. You say, let's do something that will give me pleasure. So pleasure really is over a lot of the decisions that we make every day of our life. And it's interesting as we understand the brain, that our brain was wired for pleasure, joy, happiness. It experiences pain, but it doesn't want to stay in pain. It wasn't designed to stay in pain. So as soon as the brain has pain, it goes to work to say, what's the problem here? How do I resolve the pain so that we can return to happiness? So we are wired for joy. And then the second thing is we have physical needs, relational needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs. Physical needs, food, water. Stuff we need to keep the machine working. And then part of a physical need, but it begins to go into an emotional, relational need, is in your teens you begin to feel this thing, a sex drive. But at some point, it's not just about sex. Something in you says, I want a family. And you're driven to begin a relationship that hopefully will lead to a relationship where you have kids and you have a family. And that is wired into us because God said to Adam, be fruitful and multiply. And then we're wanting relationships. We're wanting to have connection. So every child comes into the world, they need to feel bonded to the parents. They need to feel attached. And then as they get a bit older, they want friends. And then as they get a bit older, they want to feel part of a group. They want to fit in and belong. And then as they get a bit older, they go, I don't want just casual friends. I want a close friend where I can have intimacy, where I can have kind of a bared soul relationship with somebody else and feel a connection at a deep soul level. And part of that is what God said to Adam is, he said, Adam, I want you to name all of the animals. And Adam began naming the animals, and he noticed that there was a male and female animal, 2 of each. And he said, what's going on? I'm only one. They all get a partner. Where's my partner? And he says, I want a relationship. So God made Eve, and he said, this is the reason a man should leave his mom and dad and become one. That is built into us. And then in a relationship, there's something wired into us that relationships should be about love. I don't know if you ever thought about it, but God designed anger to have a very positive, healthy purpose. When do we get angry the most? When somebody disrespects us or lies to us or cheats on us or something's not just. And what the anger does is say, hey, that's not right. If we continue to lie, we're going to destroy a relationship. If we continue to cheat on each other, we're going to destroy the relationship. So we're in an unhealthy place when we lie. My anger is motivating me and wanting to return the relationship to a healthy, loving place. And so we are wired for love. And so a child, in order to feel love, doesn't just need verbal words that say, I love you. They need to feel totally accepted. They need to be respected. They need to be nurtured. They need to be comforted when they're in pain. And if they're not, then the child walks around feeling hurt because they're not getting love. So we're wired for love. Then we're wired for security. We need a sense of safeness. We need a sense of security. So a child needs to feel that home is a safe place, that mom and dad are a rock, that they're the anchor, that even though their outside world might be with a lot of stress and different things happening, they can come home and depend on mom and dad to be there for them. We need that security. Part of that, to feel secure, a child needs consistency. They don't need the rules to change all the time. That makes them insecure because they don't know where the boundaries are. They don't need a mom or dad that's angry one minute, then super sweet the next, then angry again. They can't feel secure within that. And then they need an environment to feel secure that is just, that's fair. Favorite words of every little kid is, that's not fair. Because they need fairness to feel security. And then we have built into us a need for purpose. And so God said to Adam, I want you to manage, to be a steward of the creation that I have given. I want you to work the fields. I want you to care for the livestock. In other words, God said you need a purpose of a job, a calling in your life. I was fascinated in reading a study that was done on the millennial generation, now in their teens and coming into their 20s. And as they did this evaluation and thing with them, what stood out is this is the most prosperous generation that has ever been on the planet. They've got more technology, more games, more things to do. And yet, when they got the surveys back, the haunting statement within most of the surveys was, we don't feel we have a sense of purpose. Why am I here? I don't want my life just to be playing video games, eating and sleeping. I want my life to count for something, to make a difference in this world. And that was built into us. And that's what God was saying to Adam. I've given you a purpose, and you are to reproduce, and you are to manage. And then with that purpose is also a need to feel value. Not just in what I do in my job, but in who I am as a person, that I have value even if I can't perform a whole lot of things. We have that calling or need for validation. That's built into us. So within all of that, we have a flip side. We need that purpose, that work. And then God said to Adam, work 6 days, but on the seventh day, rest. So we need a balance in life between working and resting. In order to be able to continue to work well, we got to have downtime. Time when there's no stress, time when it's hassle-free, and we can just chill. Wired into us, wired into God's design for us. And then God's made us with a longing for beauty. Do you realize that God could have made only one color in the world? Brown. Imagine a world with brown only. He could have made a world where only rice to eat. And he could have made a world that was just like the prairies everywhere. No mountains, no oceans. I don't even think what that would be like. But what do we have in our soul? We love sunsets. We love mountains. We love oceans. We love the changing of the leaves. There's beauty there that our hearts are called to it. We love art. We love good music. It's beautiful. It raises us to a place of pleasure. And then we need a wow. We need a feeling of awe once in a while in our life. If you remember taking your kids to the Forks to watch the fireworks for the first time, they see these fireworks and their eyes are as big as saucers. And they're just shaking. They're so excited. And all the way home is, Dad, we got to do that again. And Dad, that was amazing. And all of that. And they go back. Now, here's the tricky thing. If you were to take your kid to see fireworks every day for a month, you realize at the end of the month it would not be, Dad, I can't wait to be Dad. This is boring. Can't we do something exciting? And what you realize is when we have that awe experience, we're almost speechless. But it gives us a pleasure that goes really, really deep. But to have the same awe, we need a greater and greater stimulant. You realize there's only one thing in the world that is able to do that, and that's an infinite God. Because we'll never stop learning about Him, so we'll never stop standing in awe. And that was built into us. And then that leads to the spiritual. So you saw that we're physical beings, we're relational beings, we're emotional beings, and we're spiritual beings, all built into us. So God said, you want to get the recipe for life? Here's where it starts. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. I'm not talking about religion when I talk spiritual. I'm talking about a connection with God. A heart that begins to beat with His heart. A heart that has His passions, His priorities. A heart that draws life from Him to the deepest part of me. That's how God wired us. Now, if all those 11 needs were met consistently in your life, what would you experience? You'd experience joy. You'd experience contentment. You would feel satisfied. You would feel whole. But what happens if one of those needs or more than one of those needs isn't met? You feel an emptiness. Something's missing. And that takes us to the 12th need, which is we're driven to a sense of wholeness and completeness. Do you realize that when your brain senses that one of your needs isn't met, it senses an emptiness, it can't relax? Because it's looking for a solution to take you back to joy. It's looking for a solution that says, what's going on here? Something's missing. And it looks for solutions to that, trying to find it. Now, what would happen to a child in a healthy home who starts to cry because one of their needs isn't met? The parents would come along, diagnose what the need that needs to be met is, meet the need, and the child would stop crying and be happy again. And then as the child got older, they would give the child tools so they could learn to meet their own needs in healthy ways. So let me show you what happens in a child who doesn't have that happen. They're living as a 5-year-old, let's say, and they're not being accepted. They're being teased because they're a bit overweight. Mom and dad make fun of them, always putting pressure on them to lose weight, calling them chubby, pudgy, all of that. And they're feeling an emptiness there from not being accepted. And then when they cry, they're told just to get over it. And they're not nurtured or comforted. Do you realize the brain in a healthy home allows the child to resolve pain? But this child can't resolve the pain because the parents aren't helping. And so they cry, they get angry, and the parents say, smarten up. And it's not resolved. So now they're living with an unresolved need that they can't find a solution to. That is what makes a hole in the heart. The inability of a child to resolve a basic need physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. So what does the child do? And this happens at a subconscious level. Let's say this 5-year-old all of a sudden one day finds chocolate ice cream. They eat it and they've never felt such pleasure in all their life. And their brain says, I just found the solution to my problems. Chocolate ice cream. Now here's what's going on. God gave us the gift of food to meet physical needs. That's the healthy use of food. But what just happened with the brain? It went to use food to meet emotional needs. So now it has stepped outside of God's design, what is healthy, and it is using food to try to meet the wrong need. And it is like salt water. It seems to satisfy, but it makes you thirstier. So let me take you through quickly those 12 needs. So the kid first starts with food. And then they find this thing called sex. And they say, forget chocolate ice cream. I found the solution to all of my problems. Now, same thing applies. God gave sex as the most beautiful, pleasurable gift when it's used within his design. But now if you try to use it to meet emotional needs it wasn't designed to meet, you now create an addiction. And that's what happens. So then the person has a child. And they say, this is an amazing experience. I feel so much love. I have never felt so good. The solution to my life is just keep popping out babies. Then I feel this love until they're 6 months old and I want to get rid of them all. But that begins to happen. And then they find purpose and significance. They get a job and they get money and power and they become a workaholic. They use it outside of God's design. And then they find wow experiences through adrenaline rushes. So let's just get into extreme sports and almost kill ourselves on a daily basis, and we'll get the rush, and we feel so alive and so much awe, and you develop an addiction there. And then some find a religion addiction. And all of that is the brain trying to find a solution to the hole in the heart. But what is actually happening is it's creating a life outside of God's design. And that life leads to addiction. And then when they find drugs and alcohol, they go, I finally found it. And then they're hooked because they think it will fill the emptiness within. But what's the real solution? What's recovery? Recovery is learning to meet all 12 of those needs in a healthy way by God's design. Recovery is learning to fill the hole in your heart the way God designed it to be filled. And recovery is getting healthy, bottom line. It's not a program. It's not just doing one thing. It's not just finding the spiritual. It's finding the physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual in a healthy way. Now let me take you back to Genesis. Genesis was laid out in a very particular way for a particular reason. Genesis 1 and 2, God creates this beautiful world. Everything is beautiful. And then all of a sudden, if you didn't know the story, all of a sudden people are dying. All of a sudden there's disease and sickness and there's famine and there's wars and there's decay. And people are going, what's caused the problems in our world? Why is this all falling apart? Why is our world becoming a broken place? And politicians will come along and say, we just need more education. And there's value in that. Others will come along and say, we just got to get rid of poverty. And there's value in that. God says, let me tell you the story of Genesis 3. And I'll give you the correct diagnosis to the root of our problem. And he tells the story of Adam and Eve in the garden eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that word tree, or phrase tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that was built on a Hebrew idiom which meant to think I'm smarter than God. And he is saying, here's the root of the problem. We turned our back on God, and we said, God, we think you're kind of stupid about a few things, so go take a little holiday. We'll handle it from here, because we're smarter than you in this area. And we turned our back and did it our way. That's the source of all the problems. It's a spiritual source. Now, that's where many Christians stop, at Genesis 3. And they say, everything's spiritual. Everything's a spiritual source. Let's just do spiritual. And they only do one out of the 12 needs. And so that's why I love Genesis 4 and 5. Because what Genesis 4 and 5 shows is this. When people turn against God and think they're smarter than God, they start to die inside. But then Genesis 4 and 5 says they start hurting each other. There's a self-centeredness that settles in. And now you wound other people. There's revenge. There's resentments. There's cheating, immorality. All because you turn your back on God, now you hurt other people. So then God takes us in a new direction. He says the people that have the greatest power to hurt other people are parents. They have been given by God, more power and authority over a couple lives than any other person in the world. Any politician, any pastor, any teacher. Parents have power to bless or to hurt more than anybody else. And so God starts to emphasize to parents, love your children. And loving your children means meeting their 12 needs consistently. And he says, if you don't, and I'm at Exodus 20, where God gives the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments are basically defining what love is. So what does it mean to love somebody? You don't lie to them. You don't steal from them. You don't cheat on them. That's what love is. And then right after the 10 Commandments, God speaks to parents. And he says this, if you don't love your children, if you hurt them and don't meet their needs, you're going to wound them, and then they're going to wound their children to 3 or 4 generations. And what he is saying is, you have so much power that when you mess up your child, you don't just mess up him. It takes 3 or 4 generations to turn it around. That's the power. And then he comes to Deuteronomy 6. And he says, parents, I want you to wear my law on your forehead, on your hands, on your heart, on the doorposts of your house, on the doorposts of your gate. And what he is saying is, I want my word, my design, my healthy living design to control your thinking, your emotions, your behavior, your work. I don't want you just to talk a good talk. I want you to walk it in everything. That's because if you don't, you hurt your children. And then in Ephesians 6, God says, parents, don't provoke your children to anger. And the word for anger that is used is a deep, deep, settled anger, a lava that boils deep down, always there. So let me get you to think, what happens to a child who isn't respected, who isn't accepted, who isn't comforted? They get angry because that need's not being met. And then they get punished for being angry, so they just stuff their anger down. That need's not met. It should be, but nobody's doing it. I get punished if I act out, so I'll stuff it, and they become deeply angry. That's what God is saying. Don't do that. Because that sets up a child to live with unresolved anger and unresolved needs, a massive hole in their heart. And when they find behaviors or drugs, they will try to fill it with that. And it makes them very susceptible. Now let me take all that biblical talk and show that we are saying the very same thing in the vernacular or vocabulary today in the world of psychology. What all of that parental stuff is called, not meeting a child's needs consistently, it is called complex trauma. Let me explain it briefly. We know what trauma is that being in a situation that is so dangerous, overwhelming, and you don't have the tools to handle it. And so what you do is you go into survival mode, fight, flight. That's the result of trauma. So we make a distinction now, and we have simple trauma and complex trauma. Simple trauma doesn't mean it's no big deal trauma. Simple simply means one time. So simple trauma is one-time event. You got car accident, you got a rape, a one-time event that was overwhelming, simple trauma. Complex trauma is in line with simple. So simple is one, complex is more than one. And what it's talking about is ongoing danger, ongoing environment where a person doesn't feel safe, where they're always walking on eggshells, on guard, always ready to fight or flight. That's what happens when a child doesn't get their needs met. If they weren't accepted and were a bit overweight and they got teased and criticized all the time, they walk on eggshells, full of fear, because every night is, okay, is somebody going to make fun of me? Is somebody going to tease me today? And so you get a spectrum of complex trauma. At the very severe end is abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, verbal. Then you get abandonment. Then you get neglect. Parents who are physically there, who meet the child's physical needs, but they're not there for them emotionally. They don't connect with the child. They're not emotionally available. They might be in the same room, but they're not there. And the child knows it. And then the subtle end is not getting certain emotional needs met consistently. That sets up fight or flight. That sets up a hole in the heart. The diagram there. In the blue circle, pain, problem, danger. In a healthy home, when a child faces a problem, they get scared, but the parents say, hey, here's the tools for figuring this problem out, and I'm going to walk beside you and support you. And the child comes out the other side of the circle, and they made it through, and they grew up, and they learned new skills, and they're smarter and more mature because of that. And so a child in a healthy home, when they see a problem, they don't see it as a bad thing. They see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow. Now, what happens with complex trauma? A child comes to a problem, and nobody's there to help them. Nobody's there to give them tools. And so they venture into the problem on their own, and they get hurt. So they run back. Then they come to another problem. They venture in, and they get hurt. They back away, and what does their brain conclude? All problems are bad. Problems only lead to pain. So avoid problems, avoid pain at all cost. Because if you go into a problem, you only get more pain piled on more pain. And so they live with fight or flight. So two things that I want you to understand. The essence of complex trauma is a child facing a problem too big for themselves, but nobody's there to give them the tools or support. They feel abandoned. They feel all alone. Do you realize that all children experience dangerous situations, but not all children have complex trauma? Because some of the children had parents who taught them and supported them and walked them through it. The ones who end up with complex trauma are the ones who face the problems abandoned, feeling abandoned. That's their perception. And then the second thing that I want you to see is that when a person starts to do fight-flight as their way of coping with problems, they stop growing emotionally. They stop adding to their healthy toolkit. So they might be 50 years old today, their belly button age, their physical age, but they're emotionally still an 8-year-old because they stopped growing there. So what is our job as a church community? We're to be a family to people who were once abandoned. And we're to help them learn how to meet their needs and give their tools. We're to meet some of those needs for them so they begin to experience what it's like to meet those needs. As a church, we're not just about meeting the spiritual need, though that's very important. We want to meet physical needs, emotional needs, relational needs, because we are convinced that God wired us to need all those needs met in order to have joy. And so we, as a church community, are about helping each other get healthier and healthier, knowing how to meet needs, getting needs met, so that we can finally, at some point in our life, say, the hole has finally been filled the right way. And that is my hope for everybody here. Some of you may have come today, many of you may have come today, feeling that deep emptiness, looking for answers. And like Juan said, he was always haunted by, why do I keep falling back? Why do I keep doing what I'm doing? And then to finally realize it's not just one little quick fix solution. I got to spend the rest of my life learning how to be healthy and becoming that. Then the joy begins to come. Let's pray together. Father, you have made us complex but beautiful creatures. And I pray for each one this morning that is struggling with a hole in their heart, that you would just meet them and help them see the roadmap and help them have the courage and the trust to begin venturing down this road of becoming healthy and becoming what you designed us to be. Amen.